Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Oh, you may come forward. You stand right there, Ms. Means will swear you. You may be seated.
And Your Honor, maybe we approach the witness.
You may.
Good afternoon, Mr. Nadella. Good afternoon. You are chairman and CEO of Microsoft, correct? That is correct. And you report to the board of directors, is that correct? That is correct. And you have an obligation to be truthful and accurate when you make presentations to the board of directors, correct? That's correct. You're familiar with the senior leadership team of Microsoft, correct? Yes. And the senior leadership team is sometimes abbreviated as SLT, correct? That's correct. And the senior leadership team includes the senior executives at Microsoft who report directly to you, correct?
And that's right. And there are also a couple of people who don't report directly to me.
Mr. Spencer is a member of the senior leadership team at Microsoft, correct? That's correct. Microsoft's business is divided up into customer solution areas, correct? That's correct. And gaming is one of the customer solution areas, correct? Correct. And Mr. Spencer leads the gaming business? That's correct. Mr. Spencer and his team have responsibility for managing gaming business, correct? Correct. You don't negotiate game publishing deals yourself, correct, Mr. Nadella?
I don't.
And you also don't make decisions about content exclusivity yourself, correct? That's correct. Mr. Spencer makes the calls about content exclusivity decisions, correct? That's correct. As part of your duties as CEO, you conduct Microsoft's earnings calls with the investment community, correct? The purpose of those earnings calls is to highlight for Microsoft's investors how the company has performed for a particular quarter. Is that correct? That's correct. And there are certain key metrics that are used to measure that performance, correct? That's correct. You try to highlight items that are important to Microsoft's long-term strategy during those earnings calls. Is that right, Mr. Nadella? That's correct. And during those earnings calls, as CEO of Microsoft, you have an obligation to be truthful and accurate in your statements to the investment community, correct? That's correct. Mr. Nadella, Microsoft tracks share developments in the newest generation of Gen 9 consoles between the company and Sony, correct?
You said the newest consoles?
Yes. Share developments in the newest generation of console between Microsoft.
Yeah, among many things, yes, I do track that.
And Mr. Nadella, when you conduct earnings calls with Microsoft's investors, you give updates to those investors how Microsoft is performing in terms of its market position for next-gen consoles, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a gaming section in each earnings call, and I try to, sort of give the characterization of both our ambition of gaming as well as traction we have in a given quarter. So I kind of define it based on how the market defines gaming, not just by a particular metric.
If I could have you turn your binder to PX 9015. And this is the Q3 2022 Microsoft earnings call transcript. And Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move PX 9015 into evidence.
Admitted.
Mr. Nadella, could I direct your attention to page 005, PX 9015? Let me know when you're there. There. Okay. Mr. Nadella, on the fifth paragraph here, this is your section of the presentation. You see where you state, with our Xbox Series X, S, and X consoles, we have taken share globally for 2 quarters in a row, and we are the market leader this quarter among the next-gen consoles in the United States, Canada, UK, and Western Europe. Do you see that, sir? Yep. that statement was accurate when you made it to Microsoft's investment community, correct?
Yep.
And Mr. Dale, I'd like to show you a document that's marked PX9084 in your binder. And this is the Q4 2022 earnings call. And Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move PX9084 into evidence.
Submitted.
Could direct your attention to page 005 of PX9084, Mr. Nadella. You see the fourth paragraph where you state, we've sold more consoles life to date than any previous generation of Xbox and have been the market share leader in North America for 3 quarters in a row among next-gen consoles. You see that? Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Nadella. This is page 005 of PX9084.
Yep.
Got it. Okay. Do you see that statement, sir?
Yep.
And that statement was true and accurate when you made it to Microsoft's investors, correct?
Yep.
Mr. Nadella, when you refer to next-gen consoles during these earnings calls, you're referring to Generation 9 consoles, correct?
I believe so.
Switching topics a little bit, Mr. Nadella, you submit an annual CEO self-assessment as part of your performance evaluation to the Microsoft Board of Directors, correct?
I do.
I'd like you to turn to page PX1747 in your binder.
Seven four
1747. And Mr. Nadella, this is your August 2022 CEO self-assessment, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move PX1747 into evidence.
Submitted.
Now, Mr. Dale, this document is confidential, so we're not going to be getting into any specifics here. But in general, sir, as part of this self-assessment, you provide a memo detailing some of the company's key achievements in the past year, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Nadella, you're familiar with the term SLT scorecard, correct?
Yes.
And SLT means senior leadership team.
That's correct.
The SLT scorecard contains the metrics used to track senior leadership team's performance.
That's correct.
And you included a copy of the SLT scorecard with your own performance assessment here, correct?
That's correct.
If I could direct your attention to page 009, PX1747.
Yes.
Now, Mr. Nadella, we're not going to get into specifics on this slide, but this slide contains the SLT metrics for Microsoft's gaming business in this particular table, correct?
Yes.
And do you see the third row of this table contains a particular metric, Mr. Nadella, with a green dot?
I do.
And at the bottom right-hand side of page 9, Mr. Nadella, there is a series of footnotes that explains some of the metrics. I'm going to direct your attention to the second one. I don't want you to read it aloud, but Mr. Nadella, does this footnote explain how this particular metric is calculated?
It does.
And it explains what is and what is not included in that metric, correct?
That's correct.
Now, this table highlights Microsoft's target for the gaming business for this reporting period, correct?
That's correct.
And it also highlights Microsoft's actual achievement for the gaming business for this reporting period, correct?
Yeah, that's one metric of the the 3 that I have here.
So for this reporting period, which is your most recent CEO self-assessment, Microsoft exceeded its goal on this metric for the gaming business. Is that correct, Mr. Nadella?
Yeah, we set it low.
And if you could, please flip to page 029 of PX 1747. Let me know when you're there. 029, sir.
Zero two nine. I don't.
Same exhibit, page
Sorry,
029.
page 029,
Oh.
same exhibit, Mr.
Oh,
Nadella.
sorry. I thought you. So this is you get me back to the right
Yes,
PX.
it's page 029 of PX 1747.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Nadella, this is part of your actual CEO self-assessment memo, correct?
Yes.
And I'm going to direct your attention to the top portion of this page. There are 6 bullets listed under here. Do you see those, Mr. Nadella?
Yes, I do.
Okay, now we're not going to read any of those bullets, but Mr. Nadella, broadly speaking, these 6 bullets provide your summary of the Microsoft gaming business's highlights and key accomplishments for this reporting period, correct?
Yeah, the top is the highlights and the bottom is the lowlights.
And Mr. Nadella, this self-assessment memo forms part of the basis for how you are compensated for your performance, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Nadella, you can set that document aside. We're going to go ahead and show you what's been pre-marked as PX 1274. You could flip to that in your binder.
Okay.
Mr. Dale, this is an email from you to Mr. Phil Spencer, Mr. Tim Stewart, and several other individuals with the title subject is Xbox share versus PlayStation. You see that?
Yep.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move PX 1274 into evidence.
Admitted.
Mr. Della, you are asking Mr. Spencer and Mr. Stewart and the others, what is the share difference between PlayStation and us in this generation right now in the US, correct?
That's correct.
And this generation, again, Mr. Della, that's Gen 9, right?
That's correct.
I'd like to switch topics now and talk to you a little bit about cloud gaming. Mr. Della, you're familiar with cloud streaming
Yes, I am.
and you're familiar with cloud gaming.
Yes, I am.
Streaming games on the cloud allows the user to potentially play on lower powered devices, such as a Samsung TV. Is that right, Mr. Nadella?
Yeah, I mean, cloud streaming can essentially transcend any device, but that'll be one use case.
And that allows gamers to enjoy the best graphics without having to rely on a high powered console, for example. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't think of it as a strictly a substitute to the console. I mean, at least the market feedback to date has been people love their console, people love their PCs, people love their phones, and use cloud gaming as an adjunct.
And by allowing those lower powered devices to play high intensity games, cloud gaming potentially expands the overall gaming market. Is that
That's
right?
correct.
Today, Mr. Nadella, gamers can play their games on a console, PC, and their mobile phones. Is that right?
That's correct.
Cloud gaming has the potential to emerge as the fourth platform for gamers to play their games. Is that right?
It's potentially possible. We've been working on it for close to a decade. It may take more than a decade, but yes, I mean, the feedback to date is that it's just not good enough as a, definitely as a substitute to any of the current platforms. But, it can break through at some point on something new, but it's not yet happened, whether both on the economics as well as the content side.
And you provide updates on Microsoft's cloud gaming business as part of Microsoft earnings calls, correct?
I do.
And cloud is one of the pillars that makes up the core of Microsoft's gaming strategy, correct?
Yes, it is.
And you have highlighted that fact to Microsoft's investors, correct?
Yeah, and just to make sure it's clear, whenever I think about the cloud in the context of the Xbox pillars of content, cloud, and community, to me, Xbox Live is part of the cloud. So even when you're thinking about a console or a PC, the cloud is actually very integral to the experience. So it's not streaming alone when I think about the cloud.
Streaming is still part of that overall cloud.
It's a
right?
minor part of that cloud, really, because if I look at the metrics that you were pointing me to earlier, we measure monthly active users of xCloud. That's a pretty important thing for Phil and team to track.
And you've described cloud as one of the big bets that is paying off for Microsoft's gaming business in an earnings call to investors last year. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm sure I may have them.
I'm going to show you a document which has been remarked as PX 9102. Please turn to that. Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move PX 9102 be admitted into evidence.
Admitted.
And if you could, Mr. Nadella, please turn the page to page 009, PX 9102. Here you state, now on to gaming, the big bets we have made across content, community, and cloud over the past years are paying off. We saw record engagement as well as revenue this quarter. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And Mr. Nadella, that was an accurate and true statement when you made it to the Microsoft investment community, correct?
That's correct.
And right below that, Mr. Nadella, you also highlight that Microsoft's Game Pass had achieved more than 25 million subscribers across PC and console, correct?
That's correct.
And that was a true and accurate statement when you made it to the Microsoft investment community?
That's correct.
And at the very bottom of that paragraph, Mr. Nadella, do you see where you highlight, and more than 20 million have played Halo Infinite, making it the biggest Halo launch in history. You see that?
I do.
And that was a true and accurate statement when you made it to Microsoft's investment community?
Yes.
You represented to investors that Microsoft continues to lead the fast-growing cloud gaming market in an investor call, correct?
I may have, but are you referring to that particular?
Go ahead and direct your attention, Mr. Nadella, to PX 9012 again.
9012.
We'll direct your attention to page 006 with 9012. Okay. And Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move for PX 9012 to be admitted.
Admitted.
At the very bottom, Mr. Nadella, where you state, we continue to lead in the fast-growing cloud gaming market with just last month, we made Xbox cloud gaming available on PCs, as well as Apple phones and tablets via the browser from 22 countries, with more to come. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Nadella, xCloud is Microsoft's cloud gaming app. Is that right?
It's cloud streaming. Yeah.
Streaming. Thank you. And again, Mr. Nadella, when you made this statement to Microsoft's investors, that was a true and accurate statement?
Yes, I do.
Microsoft today wants to ensure that it can stream its content to any platform. Is that a fair statement, Mr. Nadella?
Yes.
And you've described a future state of gaming as the North Star vision. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, to me, as we've done, and but frankly, as a software company, I always think software first, which is I want to be able to work on all platforms.
And you've discussed this North Star vision with Mr. Spencer. Is that right?
That's correct.
I'm going to show you PX1751, which is in confidential, Mr. Nadella, so I'm not going to get into any details, but if you could please turn to that in your binder. 1751. And Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move for PX1751 to be admitted.
Admitted.
And again, without going into any details, Mr. Nadella, does this email capture the exchange you had between you and yourself and Mr. Spencer about the North Star vision for cloud gaming?
Seems like it. I don't recall it, but I see it.
Okay, Mr. Nadella, I'm going to go ahead and show you what's been pre-marked as PX4066 in your binder. 4066.
Okay.
Are you there, sir?
Yes, I do.
And this is an email from Ms. Bond to Mr. Spencer, Ms. Wright, and Ms. McKissick. The title here is Meta Quest Event. Do you see that?
I do.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move PX4066 to be admitted into evidence.
Admitted.
And at the very bottom, Mr. Nadella, there's a part of the chain where you write, I want this to be like, say, Samsung TV like socket for us when your schedule allows and they have the volume. Mr. Nadella, when you refer to the Samsung TV like socket, can you explain what you're referring to when you use the term socket?
Just a device endpoint.
And the Meta Quest event here, Mr. Nadella, that relates to the launch of a device by Meta. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And they requested a demonstration of the xCloud app as part of the launch. Is that right?
Yeah, we were part of the launch and we showed many different pieces of our software from product ready to gaming. Yeah.
And if I could actually turn the page and direct your attention to the top of page 002 of PX466. You see that, Mr. Nadella? Yeah. Okay. And you write, I want to make it clear to the world that Microsoft is focused on cloud-first approaches. Teams, WIN 365, xCloud as the future of their end-use sockets. You see that?
Yes, I do.
And Mr. Nadella, WIN 365 is Windows 365. That's correct. You also write, but want to basically use every opportunity to make cloud streaming more mainstream, the better it is for us in the long run for all the strategic reasons we talk about. You see that, sir?
I do.
And Mr. Nadella, Did Microsoft debut the xCloud app as part of the Meta Quest launch?
I'm actually not sure. I think we tried to, or we at least intended to by this mail app. I'm not particularly sure whether we did or not.
All right, Mr. Nadella, are you familiar with the LKG memos at Microsoft?
Yes, I am.
And just broadly speaking, Mr. Nadella, what is an LKG memo?
In Windows, there's this concept of a last known good. So I brought it to our strategy.
If I could direct your attention to page 1746. I'm sorry, exhibit 1PX 1746, your binder, Mr. Nadella.
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to move PX 1746 into evidence.
Admitted.
Again, Mr. Nadella, this is confidential, so we're going to talk around this so we don't reveal any confidential information here. But broadly speaking, LKG memos set out Microsoft's overall corporate strategy for the board of directors, correct?
Yeah, it's a living document that we use as a way to discuss topics.
And if I could direct your attention to page 009, PX 1746. Let me know when you're there.
Yes, I am.
And broadly speaking, Mr. Nadella, PX 009 describes how Microsoft is generally organized. Is that fair assessment?
Yeah, it is.
And if I could direct your attention to the second paragraph, do you see the first sentence that starts with the words "for each"?
Yes, I do.
And this section sets out some priorities for the various components of the Microsoft business units. Is that right, Mr. Nadella?
That's correct.
Okay. And you see at the bottom, Mr. Nadella, there's a footnote that defines how these priorities are captured within this document. Do you see that footnote?
I do.
If I could have you flip to page 018, PX 1746.
Yes.
And again, discussing those priorities as explained with that previous footnote, Mr. Nadella, the series of bullets, the very top middle column, they list the priorities for the Microsoft gaming business. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
All right, Mr. Daly, you can set that document aside. You discussed Microsoft's cloud streaming competitors with Mr. Spencer, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. I'd like to show you PX 1750 if you can. Please turn to that in your binder.
Okay.
This time, Your Honor, I'd like to move PX 1750 into evidence.
Admitted.
Now, again, Mr. Dale, I want to be careful because there's confidential information here. Could I direct your attention to the middle of the page? The email, do you see where it begins, "I thought"? Do you see that?
I do. I do.
And you refer to one of Microsoft's cloud gaming competitors right here. Is that correct, Mr. Nadella?
I do.
Okay. We direct your attention to the top of the page. Mr. Spencer responds with his views about that same cloud gaming competitor, correct?
Yes.
Now, don't read the information out loud, Mr. Della, but in the sentence that starts with "that's right," Mr. Spencer is agreeing with the point that you raised previously, correct? Yeah. And set that document aside. Mr. Nadella, you're familiar with the gaming CSA SLT strategy review, correct?
Yes.
And that's where the senior leadership team sits down with the leaders of the gaming business to discuss strategy, right? That's correct. So direct your attention to PX 1777.
Okay.
And Your Honor, at this time, I'd like to move PX 177 into evidence.
Admitted.
Mr. Nadella, the court's heard some testimony about Microsoft's xCloud app and the way it works today on consoles. But consumers can access xCloud in other ways. Is that correct?
Yeah, they can access it from any platform.
And Mr. Nadella, Microsoft has a partnership with Samsung with the xCloud app on smart TVs, correct?
I believe so. I'm not into the details on it, but I believe so.
And that means that Samsung TV owners have access to the xCloud app and can stream games on their smart TVs?
That's correct.
So no consoles required for that, right?
That's correct.
And no mobile phones required for that, correct?
Correct.
Now, playing games on a Samsung smart TV does require cloud streaming on the back end. Is that right?
That's correct.
I'd like to direct your attention to page 003 of PX 1777.
Yes.
Now, just generally speaking, Mr. Dale, I don't want to go into any specifics. These are notes related to the CSA SLT strategy review that reflect the discussion that the leadership team, including you, had at this meeting, correct?
It looks like it did.
I just want to direct your attention to the top of the page, Mr. Dale. You asked a question at the top of the page. Do you see that?
Yes.
And Mr. Spencer responded. And again, I'm just going to direct you to read the first and last part of his response yourself.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. And then skipping down, do you see where Miss Bond responds with the sentence that starts, "We need to"? Do you see that?
Yeah, I do.
And Mr. Kareem, moving back up just a little bit, Mr. Dela, see where Mr. Kareem Chowdhury also responds to your question?
Yep.
Okay. And Mr. Chowdhury was the corporate vice president for xCloud. Is that right?
That's correct.
And in Mr. Chowdhury's response, he talks about a conversion, correct?
Yeah.
And there's an abbreviation in the response here. You see that, Mr. Nadella?
In Mr. Chowdhury's?
In Mr. Chowdhury's response, correct?
Yes, I do.
And GP stands for Game Pass, correct?
That's correct.
And this conversation took place in November of 2022. Is that correct?
They could say so.
You see the date on the email on the first page of PX 17701?
Yeah.
Your Honor, we have no further questions at this time. Pass the witness.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
How long have you been CEO of Microsoft?
9.5 years.
And in that time, has it been your general philosophy to make software available on more platforms or fewer platforms?
All platforms. I grew up in a company that always believed that software should run in as many platforms as possible. And that's the Microsoft I grew up in. I believe in that.
Are you aware that Xbox has some games that are exclusive to its consoles?
I believe it is. And if it is up to me, I would love to get rid of the entire sort of exclusives on consoles, but that's not for me to define, especially as a low share player in the console market. That the dominant player there is defined market competition using exclusives. And so that's the world we live in.
But is that the world you'd like to be the case in gaming?
I have no love for that world.
You were also asked some questions about whether you report out on Microsoft's position with the Xbox relative to the PlayStation in Generation 9. Do you remember that?
I do.
Did those consoles release at about the same time?
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the fundamental reasons why I wanted to make sure. I mean, having really not won the previous generation, even we were trying to track when, because both of them launched at the same time and they were supply constrained. Because both the chips were being made by the same designer. And so therefore we wanted to make sure that we were getting our fair share there.
As the CEO of Microsoft, do you view competition in consoles as just limited to the PlayStation and the Xbox?
I mean, at the end of the day, we are defined by the market and their definition of gaming. And when I look at anyone who's going to look at how Microsoft's doing in gaming or how Phil and team are doing in gaming, they'll look at how we're doing in console, which is us and Sony and Nintendo. And then beyond that, how things happen, what about PC gaming and what about mobile gaming and anything that may emerge in cloud gaming. All of those would be aspects of our gaming ambition.
You were also asked some questions about whether you tracked share in the United States among consoles. Do you remember that?
I do.
Do you view gaming as a United States specific phenomenon?
Not really. I mean, it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's the same content worldwide. It's the same consoles worldwide, same PCs worldwide, same phones worldwide. But we do care about, having a share position in the US and all the markets, like including Japan.
Sorry to make you go back through the binder, but could you go to PX 4066 for a minute?
4066, yep.
Page 002. You look at that paragraph, I believe you were asked about the first sentence and the third sentence, but the second sentence reads, this does not mean we take away, and you were talking about the cloud strategy here, right?
Yes.
In the second sentence, you say, this does not mean we take away from all our volume runners of Windows and console. Do you see that?
That's correct.
Has you seen cloud become a replacement for console gaming?
It's not. And
See that?
this has been our experience with many of these new platforms. You have to be competitive in each of these platforms and then look around and see what is the way to expand the market.
Have you been exploring cloud in order to get more traction on mobile devices?
That's been our primary, it's well known that the mobile systems are closed systems, unlike the PC. The only way is through their app stores. And one mechanism that we wanted to use was cloud streaming as a way to bring more competition to mobile platforms and bring sort of more opportunity for more publishers even. So that has been a goal, but it's not worked out as well as we would hope to, because they're just too closed and browsers just don't work that well.
Were Activision's mobile games part of the rationale for acquiring the company?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love their console games. I love their PC games. And I particularly love their mobile games because we don't have a footprint at all.
Play Candy Crush yourself?
I do. And Call of Duty.
Speaking of Call of Duty, I think one of the claims in this case is that Microsoft would be willing to forego sales of Call of Duty on the PlayStation to sell more consoles. Does that strategy make any sense to you?
It makes no economic sense and no strategic sense. As I said, our
role with Activision in particular and their content, and quite frankly, our content is to get our content onto more platforms and become a fantastic first-class publisher. And that's what we've done, for example, with Office. And I want to do exactly the same thing with gaming.
After the transaction was announced, did you call the head of Sony?
I did.
And why did you make that call?
I just wanted to make it very, very clear to Yoshida-san, who's someone I have a fantastic relationship with, that there should be no ambiguity in our support for the Sony platform going forward, and that this Activision relationship, in fact, if anything, should be, double. This will help us reinforce our commitment to their platform.
Have you reiterated that commitment since then?
Yeah, multiple times. I had a chance to meet with Yoshida-san as well as Mr. Ryan subsequently, and I reiterated that.
Let me ask you here today, Mr. Nadella, will you commit to continuing to ship Call of Duty on the Sony PlayStation?
100%.
Are you aware that Microsoft has signed contracts with Nintendo and 5 cloud providers that bring Call of Duty to those platforms as well?
Yes, we have.
Will Microsoft honor those contracts?
Yes, 100%.
Nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Briefly, Mr. Nadella, you weren't personally involved in negotiations with Sony regarding the proposal. Is that right?
That's correct.
You deferred that to Mr. Spencer, correct?
That's correct.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You are excused.
Thank you so much.
Okay, who's our next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. We call Dr. Dennis Carlton. As you know, his direct was submitted in writing. I
Yes.
believe it's RX 5057. So
All right.
we'll proceed to cross
So we'll go with the cross.
5057.
You can wait right there, which means we'll swear you. All right, you may be seated and you may give him the binder. You may proceed.
Peggy Feminella for the plaintiff. Good afternoon, Dr. Carlton.
Good afternoon.
Microsoft is paying Compass Lexicon $2,000 an hour for your work on this case, correct?
They bill my time at $2,000 an hour, yes.
You have worked approximately 600 to 650 hours on this matter, correct?
That sounds right, yes.
That is a bill of at least $1.2 million, correct?
Yes,
You also receive additional compensation based on other billings that Compass Lexicon charges for work on this matter, correct?
that's correct.
All of your income is currently from being an economic expert consultant, correct?
That's correct.
Appendix B of your expert report includes an accurate list of the materials you relied upon in forming your opinions that are expressed in your report, correct?
That's right. As I explained in my deposition, whenever I have a footnote in my report to cite evidence, I list that as material relied.
In your materials relied on section of your expert report in this case, setting aside data files, your opinions in this case rely on 29 ordinary course documents, correct?
That's what the number is. That's what it is. I have no reason to dispute you. I haven't counted them.
And only 3 of those 29 documents that you rely on in forming your opinions are from third parties, correct?
I haven't checked that, but I have no reason to dispute what you're saying.
In your materials relied on section of your report in this case, your opinions in this case rely on 35 different websites you visited, correct?
Again, I haven't counted them, but if that's what you say. I'll assume that's correct.
There are no declarations listed in Appendix B, correct?
I haven't checked, but again, I have no reason to dispute what you're saying.
So this means that you did not rely on any declarations in this matter in forming your opinions in your report, correct?
Relied in the sense that I've just described. It would not appear for every opinion in my expert report. If I feel like I need a source, I put a footnote and then explain which document it comes from.
And there are no declarations included in the report, correct?
I'd have to check that, but I believe that's correct. But I want to make clear, I've seen lots and lots of documents in this case,
But they're not in your materials relied on list, correct?
not relied upon in the way I've described. Yes, that's correct.
You don't list Dr. Bailey's report as material you relied on in forming your opinions, correct?
That is correct. My recollection is I had not seen her report at the time I filed my report. I've since looked through it.
Your opinions in this case rely on 10 academic sources cited, correct?
And I haven't counted them, but I have no reason to dispute what you're saying.
And these are all listed in Appendix B, correct?
It should be yes.
And 3 out of those 10 academic sources were written by you yourself, correct?
Possible. Like, yeah, if I could check, but I have no reason to dispute what you're saying.
And so, assuming I am correct, 30% of the academic sources you rely on were written by you, correct?
That might be. I could look. I think I must cite my textbook. If you look at my textbook, it's like hundreds of academic sources, but
Or
there's
you
no
can look
reason to dispute that I was a co-author of the grade.
If you need to, your report is listed at PX 5004 in the binder. You have no reason to dispute what I just said, right?
No, I'm not disputing your ability to count what's in my appendix B.
Now, you testified as an expert in the Arista Networks versus Cisco Systems case in the Northern District of California in 2018, correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
In Arista Networks versus Cisco Systems in 2018, Judge Freeman in the Northern District of California excluded part of your opinions, correct?
I have to go back and check. My recollection is it's a very minor component of my opinion.
But it's a correct statement that she did exclude part of your opinions, correct?
My recollection, I'd have to go back and check, is she excluded the ability for me to provide any statements that had legal significance. And I never intended to do that. So she just made clear she didn't want to hear an economic view of what the law should be.
And in excluding part of your opinions, Judge Freeman found that, quote, Dr. Carlton essentially opines that certain conduct should not be punished by the antitrust laws, unquote, correct?
That's what she said. But again, I wasn't intending to, interpret the law. I was saying what an economic view competition would imply.
Federal courts have excluded your analysis in part in at least 5 separate cases, correct?
Perhaps. I would have to check.
Do you have any reason to dispute that?
I don't have a reason to dispute that. But again, in most instances, my recollection is that the judge wanted to make clear that my economic view on what the law should be was not something that should be interpreted as giving a legal opinion. And I never intended to do that. I'm not a lawyer.
And these exclusions include being partially excluded twice in the Northern District of California, correct?
That I would have to check.
The second case was in Ray Cathode Ray 2 antitrust litigation in 2017, correct?
That I would have to check.
You testified in that case, correct?
Definitely great tips, yes.
And the latest exclusion of your opinions came in just May 2023 in the American Airlines JetBlue matter, correct?
That I was precluded from testifying.
That your opinions were excluded, correct?
My recollection is the judge disagreed with with my analysis. I don't believe he excluded my opinion.
Sorry, let me clarify. So in the JetBlue matter, the court found that your opinions were entitled to no weight, correct?
That's correct. But my understanding is, wasn't my understanding. It's the case is on appeal.
That in a district or was that in?
District.
Now, you're not a lawyer, correct?
I'm not a lawyer.
And you're not offering any legal opinions in this case, correct?
I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, you are not offering any legal opinions in this case?
That's correct.
Now, you do agree there are some circumstances in which a vertical merger can be anti-competitive, correct?
Yes, in some limited circumstances that can be true.
You did not attempt to define a relevant market, correct?
I did not do that in this case. Someone else did that.
You do not have an opinion one way or another about relevant antitrust markets in this case, correct?
I'm not giving an opinion about relevant antitrust markets in this case.
You are not relying on Dr. Bailey's report for any product market statements in your report, correct?
That's correct, yes.
You did not create your own demand model as part of your opinions, correct?
I did not. I modified Professor Lee's model to show its unreliability and inadequacy to justify in particular 20% conversion rate.
But you didn't do your own model, correct?
Correct. I modified his.
And you do not offer your own foreclosure model in this report or this case, correct?
Again, on the foreclosure model, I used what he put forth and showed if you correct certain errors, you get no foreclosure.
But you didn't do your own model, correct?
Well, I modified his model.
That's not doing your own model, correct? You use Dr. Lee's.
Well, I used the framework, and he's using the framework in part derived from some of the Microsoft modeling, but I altered some of the assumptions in his model to show you get a different result.
In your written direct, you referred to Sony using exclusivity to promote sales of their consoles, correct?
You check my direct, but I certainly believe that.
Microsoft also has agreements with third-party publishers that require partial exclusivity of certain games, correct?
Microsoft has certain exclusivity arrangements. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes.
Could you please turn to PX 3354 in your binder?
Three, 6, 5,
3354, sir.
3, 5. Yes.
Document, I believe, Your Honor, is meant to be under seal, so I'm going to talk around it.
Okay.
This is an email and Dr. Carlton, we're doing this in open court, even though the document is sealed. So we can't say anything out loud on what the document actually says. So we're just going to have to be a little creative. So you see PX 3354 and it's an email with an attachment, correct?
An email, yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit PX 3354.
Okay, I'll admit it and it should be confidential.
Sir, if you could please turn to PX 3354-020. And again, please do not say anything out loud about what's on that slide.
What page are you asking me to look at?
PX 3354-020.
Oh,
Can you see the charts on this page?
yes.
Now, if you look at the chart on the left, and again, please don't say anything about any of the details. That chart has 16 rows, correct?
Right.
And the chart on the right has 13 rows, correct?
Report. That's right.
EX3354 is not included in your Appendix B for materials relied on, correct?
Don't believe so.
And you did not rely on PX3354 in forming your opinions, correct?
That would be correct if it's not listed. It wouldn't be in my put down in my report. If it's not listed in the appendix.
I'm done with that one, sir. If you could turn to PX4743 in your binder, please. Honor, this document, I believe, is also mostly understandable. That I could say what the actual document is, just none of the.
Sure, we'll
details.
admit it and it'll be under seal other than the title.
Sir, are you at PX4743?
Yes.
And this is a co-marketing and development agreement between Microsoft and Activision, correct?
And yes.
Now, again, just please don't say any of the terms out loud when I point you places. If you could look at section 1.2, that lists what is part of this agreement, correct?
I see 1.2. Yes.
Yeah, that's the content included, correct?
Gives a definition.
Could you please turn to section 8.10.1. It's on page PX4743-014. I'm sorry, PX4743-014, and it's section 8.10.1.
10.1.
Yes.
Point one. What page?
Eight,
of the-
I'm sorry, sir, it's 8.10.1. It's on page 14.
Yeah. Yes, I have that. Okay.
Can you see that section, and you can see what it is describing?
If you see it, do you want me to read it?
You shall.
Yeah.
Oh.
Thank you.
If I can ask this question, there's a term there.
But she'll ask.
Actually, you did not rely on PX4743 when coming to forming your opinions, correct?
On my appendix, I didn't write up on the way I defined it.
And PX4743 is not included in your appendix, correct?
Check that. Take the word for it.
And with that document, sir. Now, your understanding is that Microsoft intends to put new Call of Duty titles into its Game Pass subscription on the day they're released, correct?
Game date, yes.
Your understanding is that putting Call of Duty into Game Pass was a prime motivation of this deal, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
In your opinions in your report, you rely heavily on the assumption that Call of Duty will be put on Game Pass post-merger, correct?
Correct.
I'd like you, sir, to turn to PX 4894 in your binder.
4894.
Yes. And please don't say anything out loud about this document either. There has been a request for this document to be sealed. PX 4894 is an email chain among Microsoft executives dated February 2023, correct?
Yes. 2/15/2023. That's my birthday.
Your Honor, I move to admit PX 4894.
Admitted.
And Dr. Carlton, Matt Booty is the head of Xbox Game Studios, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Now, if you could look on the first page, so PX 4894-001, do you see where there is a Matt Booty email at the top?
It is
Please-
what email?
It's an email from Matt Booty, but then please do not say anything else about the document out loud.
Yes. Yes.
You see where he writes and it starts, I sent.
Yes.
Could you please read that to yourself?
Yes. It
You-
just those few lines. I've read.
Yes.
Yes.
You did not rely on PX 4894 in forming your opinions, correct?
Not the best of my recollection. If it's not in my appendix, I would not have relied on it the way I described.
And PX 4894 is not listed in Appendix B of your report, correct?
I haven't checked it, but I don't recall this. I don't recall relying on this stuff.
You may put that over, sir. One of your opinions in this matter is that the agreements Microsoft signed during the pendency of this litigation are pro-competitive, correct?
Yes, compared to the but-for world of the transaction not going forward.
Specifically, your opinion is that these agreements are merger-specific efficiencies, correct?
Yes.
You also opine that Sony could avoid any potential harm from the merger by signing a contract with Microsoft to ensure it has access to Call of Duty on its current and future consoles, correct?
Yes. I mean, I don't know the words in front of me, but I believe what you just said. I agree with what.
You are aware that Microsoft made an offer to Sony regarding Call of Duty, correct?
Yes.
You rely on the existence of this offer in forming your opinions in this case, correct? You are aware that Sony has not signed this offer, correct?
I am aware of that. Talk about that in my report.
You have used this fact in part in forming your opinions, correct?
Yes.
In your report at paragraph 24,
His declaration or the report?
the report, Sir, in your report at paragraph 24, you state, quote, "It is peculiar to claim that Sony's consoles will be foreclosed from Call of Duty when Sony refuses to sign a contract that Microsoft offered to guarantee PlayStation access to Call of Duty," correct? So it is your
Yes.
opinion that Microsoft's offer to Sony guarantees access to Call of Duty, correct?
Yes. That's my characterization. That's my understanding. Yes.
You did not even cite Microsoft's written offer to Sony in your report, correct?
I'd have to check that. I believe that's correct. I believe I cite Mr. Ryan's characterization.
Right, you do not cite the written offer to Sony, correct?
Yes, I've seen the written offer. Sorry for wrote
But-
my report, but I'm citing Mr. Ryan for the proposition that he has an offer, and it had the my lab to say what the footnote says.
I don't think so. Microsoft's written offer to Sony is not listed in your materials relied on, correct?
Correct, but I cite Mr. Ryan's characterization of it.
Yes, that's not what I asked you. I was focused on the fact that you do not cite or rely on the actual written offer.
Right, they don't.
What is the footnote that you're referring to?
I'd have to find it. It's where I talk about the offer. Cite Mr. Ryan for my character for characterizing
Okay, maybe we can,
the offer.
no, don't look for it. Okay, next.
One of your opinions is that, quote, as an economic matter, that behavior is an indication that Sony is more concerned about preventing Xbox from becoming a more potent competitor, paren, or using the regulatory review process to extract even more favorable terms for the distribution of Activision content, paren, than it is with the possible loss of access to Call of Duty, correct?
How many you reading from? I was looking for the footnote.
Same paragraph, paragraph 24, sir, of your report.
One of the footnotes where I cite Ryan is footnote 65.
Okay, now go to the bottom of page 20.
Okay.
Read to the top of page 21.
Okay, it is as an economic matter. Yes, that behavior is an indication that Sony is more concerned about preventing Xbox from becoming a more potent competitor, or using the regulatory review process to extract even more favorable terms for the distribution of Activision content than it is with the possible loss of access to COD.
You are forming that opinion without relying on Microsoft's actual written offer to Sony, correct?
So again, rely in the sense that it's not cited in my footnote. What I cite in the footnote is Mr. Ryan's characterization of the offer. My understanding is the offer is not disputed.
Did you read the contract
Yes.
before you wrote this report?
Yes, it did.
You chose not to rely on.
So I don't.
No, he didn't put it in Appendix B. Next question.
In your report, you list and describe just two terms from the Sony agreement, correct? The Sony proposal.
My report.
Yep.
What speaks for itself. If I remember right, I say it's actually guaranteeing access to cost of duty, and it's giving the terms.
You're okay.
And the two terms that you rely on are the length of time and the revenue split, correct? Do not say what the,
I do rely on those, but I don't see those in paragraph 24.
this is in your report in general.
It's, I believe, later in the report, in paragraph 24, I won't speak for itself.
You would agree that there are other terms in Microsoft's proposal to Sony, correct?
Yes,
Your report does not include any economic analysis of any of the terms in the Sony proposal, correct?
that's correct. I'm simply making the point. Microsoft has made an offer to guarantee Sony access to Call of Duty on, and I won't say the terms. I mean, I do say the terms, but I won't say them in open book.
You say two terms, correct?
Yes,
You did not believe it was necessary to include any economic analysis of any of the terms in the Sony proposal, correct?
not the point I'm making, which is that that contract is guaranteed access. Access is the issue, and terms on which the access granted are terms that are consistent with other market evidence, then a reasonable interpretation on my part is that it is not that Sony is concerned about foreclosure, but rather because they could easily solve that problem, but with some other motivation. And as an economic matter, it's perfectly understandable why a transaction that would make you a competitor more powerful, more potent, more effective as a competitor would be something we should be concerned about.
You didn't do any economic analysis of the proposal, right?
Other than what I do in the report, namely that if you're worried about access, it solves that problem. Access to Call of Duty.
In coming to your opinion related to the Sony proposal, you state in your report that the contractual terms are similar to those of contracts that already exist, correct?
Say that it would help me tell me where.
Paragraph 24 of your report, sir. Say that
Well,
correct.
could you know, that's right. I do talk about it, but I don't see about those terms, but it's not in paragraph 24. Unless I'm missing something.
Where it starts, to assume that contracts cannot effectuate transactions is an extreme assumption, especially when the contractual terms are similar to those of contracts that already exist. Do you see that?
Yes. But
Now, you don't
you asked
cite
me a
any
question about the
documents.
two terms. I'm pointing out that's not what this paragraph is about. I agree with the sentence you wrote. I'm happy to answer a question about it.
That's what I'm asking you, sir, about that sentence. Now, you don't cite anything, any documents in that footnote to that point, correct?
Don't cite a document for the proposition that contracts can effectuate transactions. That's
No,
correct.
that the contractual terms are similar to those of contracts that already exist. You have no cites to that point, correct?
Did you look at footnote 65?
The footnote that is there is footnote 64, correct, sir?
I'm sorry, what did you say? Look at footnote
Footnote
65.
64 does not contain any document cites, correct?
When you are referring to the contract terms that are similar, you're referring to those two terms that we
Yes.
discussed. Okay, that's what he's referring to. He's relying on just those two, right? Just those two.
Yes, but I
Just
think
those
there's
two.
somewhere else in the report where I actually have a cite for those two terms.
Okay,
but
well, that could
these-
be, that,
these-
we don't need to do that. There'll be redirect. Okay.
You did not compare the terms of any existing agreements with the full Sony proposal, correct?
There, what I'm focusing on is that it's for X years. I won't say what X is. And it's focus, which is longer than the typical term. And it's a certain split that is,
Okay, I understand.
Are you aware that Sony signed an agreement with ZeniMax related to the game Ghostwire?
say I want
Are
to.
you aware that Sony signed an agreement with ZeniMax related to the game Ghostwire?
I don't have a specific recollection of that. Well, I've been aware of that fact at some time.
You are aware that Microsoft acquired ZeniMax for roughly $7 billion, correct?
I am aware of it.
And since Microsoft now owns ZeniMax, you had access to a copy of the Ghostwire agreement, correct?
I had access to everything in the record, my recollection.
Please turn to TX 4678 in your binder. Now, this document itself is under seal, so please don't disclose any terms in here, but PX 4678 is the Ghostwire agreement, correct?
Then and see where it goes right at
Right at the top.
Ghost wire.
I said Ghostwire.
Goes
Your Honor, I move to admit PX 4678.
Admitted.
You did not rely on PX 4678 in forming your opinions, correct?
that would be correct, yes.
PX 4678 is not listed in your appendix B, correct?
I don't believe it is. Take your word for it.
Now, sir, if you could do me a favor and pop that document out of your binder, please, so you can have it set aside next to you. And then if you could turn to RX 2170.
One seven oh.
Right. This document is also under seal.
Okay.
RX 2170 is Microsoft's unsigned written proposal to Sony, correct?
Correct, yes.
Your Honor, just for the record, RX 2170 was already admitted.
Yes.
Now, sir, you did not compare the terms of Microsoft's proposal to Sony, which is RX 2170, with the terms in the Ghostwire agreement, PX 4678, correct?
You're asking me, did I compare the ghost wire terms to the terms in the script?
Correct, you did not do that, right?
Not very, I did not do that. But what I referenced,
No, that's it. Okay, next question.
Could you please turn in again? This is under seal, so please do not divulge any information. Can you please turn to Exhibit A in the Ghostwire agreement, PX 4678-017?
Exhibit A,
Exhibit A without disclosing any information on that?
I have Exhibit A.
Now, the Sony proposal, RX 2170, does not contain any terms similar to those contained in Exhibit A of the Ghostwire agreement, correct?
Ghost wire agreement. Just does not deal with Call of Duty.
No, it's a different.
So you're asking me, did I compare this contract to the one?
You've already said, sir, that you did not compare them. I am now asking you, does the Sony proposal that Microsoft made to Sony contain any of the terms that are in Exhibit A?
I'd have to chat, but I didn't do that comparison. If you want me to do it now, I can, and so I can compare the Call of Duty proposal to this other contract if you want. Is that what you're asking me to do?
So you don't believe, let me go back. In your report, you said that these were similar terms, but you were only relying on 2 terms for similarities, not all terms in ordinary course content agreements, correct?
Maybe you misinterpreted. When I said that the split, and I won't mention it, is, I can say it's similar to a split elsewhere. I was referring specifically to Call of Duty. Okay. You're asking me to complete different, contract for Call of Duty or contract not for Call of Duty.
You didn't.
I didn't do that.
Right.
Didn't think that was relevant.
So you can put the ghost layer agreement away,
Um,
but keep out RX 2170, please.
On the intensity plan.
RX 2170. You should have that open.
That's the one between. Sony and, the,
Proposal to submit.
yes.
The Microsoft proposal to submit.
Okay.
Again, this is under seal, so please do not read anything out loud, but please look at section 1.9.
Okay.
Look at this part where the sentence that begins with "that makes it." Please don't read anything else. You see, it's the second to last line in that section.
Yes.
You see that there are two words after "that makes it."
Yep.
You did not analyze the implications of this term, correct?
But the implication of these two terms.
And you did not consider if under this clause, Microsoft and Activision get to determine whether or not this term applies, correct?
I'm not a lawyer, so I claim to have the legal expertise to interpret contractual terms and obligations. I just assumed this contract for what it was. I'll give you access to Call of Duty on the terms that are what they are, which, as I've explained, we did other Call of Duty terms and reason.
Could you please turn to Exhibit 3.6 in the same document, RS 2170? It is on the last page of the agreement of the proposal.
.6. Okay.
Look at the second paragraph that starts with "prior to." And if you could read the first sentence
Out loud or to myself.
yourself.
Yes.
In reaching your opinion, you did not take into consideration this term of the proposal, correct?
I wouldn't have taken account this particular term. On the other hand, I always assume contracts are entered into in good faith. I won't reveal what this says. I don't know how it would have affected any analysis, but you're correct. As I said earlier, what I relied upon was my understanding that there is an offer and that it contained terms that we've already discussed, and that, from my point of view, that would resolve any concerns of Sony about access to Call of Duty.
You are aware that Microsoft signed an agreement with Nintendo. Are you aware of how quickly the agreement between Microsoft and Nintendo was signed?
Quickly? Was that the word?
Yes.
My understanding is it was signed, since the deal was announced.
Can you turn to PX 7065 in your binder, please? I'm sorry, PX 7060.
That my report
I'm sorry, I had it right. 706.
065. Give me a little help. Where is that?
I
Oh,
don't
here it
see
is. 27065.
It's right after the declaration tab.
I have a 7065.
Yes, you have that.
7065. Yes, okay.
These are excerpts from Mr. Singer's deposition. This is Mr. Singer, sorry. This part is under seal, so if you could just look at transcript page 119. Lines 14 to 19. And please don't read it out loud.
Team. Yes,
That contains the information on the length of time it took to negotiate the agreement, correct?
I don't know that for certain, but I'm willing to accept that representation. If that's what you're telling me this is about.
That was under testimony, correct?
That's under what?
Under oath testimony by Mr. Singer.
I'll answer that for him. Yes.
Now, sir, you are not an expert in the technology of video games, correct?
Correct.
You are not offering an opinion about the quality that can be expected from Call of Duty if it were to be ported to current or future versions of the Nintendo Switch, correct?
I'm not offering an opinion on that. I mean, based on my expertise, no.
Now, how important the option of Call of Duty on Nintendo Switches will depend upon the quality of Call of Duty on the Nintendo Switch, correct?
Generally, the better the quality of the game, the better an alternative it is
And the
on
worse,
one place versus another.
and the worse the quality, the worse the option, correct?
Yes,
Sitting here today, you have no idea what the quality of a future Call of Duty game done by Microsoft on Nintendo will be, correct?
that's correct.
You rely in forming your opinions on the fact that Microsoft signed an agreement with NVIDIA, correct?
Yes,
The NVIDIA agreement with Microsoft is not cited in your report, correct?
I thought I referred to the agreements with cloud producers. I don't know if I listed them.
The NVIDIA agreement is not included in your Appendix B, correct?
Whatever's in the appendix is in the appendix. That you refer in the report to my understanding that there are agreements with cloud providers and that period.
Please look at paragraph 46 of your report. This PX 5004.
46. That's
And if you look at footnote 112, which is the footnote you have after you describe the NVIDIA thing, correct?
yes,
And footnote 112 is a Verge article, correct?
yes.
Is not the agreement, correct?
That's not the agreement. That's correct.
And the Verge article is a public article, correct?
Yes,
And it does not include all of the terms of the NVIDIA agreement, correct?
that's. I would assume so. Yes.
Especially since the terms of that agreement are confidential, correct?
Read the NVIDIA agreement.
I can't remember if I It's quite possible I did, but I can't tell you.
But wouldn't you have put that as your footnote as opposed to, an
My
article?
My recollection is I was trying to characterize the agreement, and this article characterized the agreement, and therefore I relied on this article to characterize the agreement rather than my reading of an agreement and me characterize it. Because then someone could ask the other attorney, it's
Okay.
their assumption versus what it's saying. I'd have to think back. It's likely if the agreement was available at the time of my report that I did with that.
But as we established, you didn't rely on it because it's not included in your materials relied upon. Correct.
This as we've discussed already.
If you could turn in your binder to PX 9453, please.
Say that once more.
9453. And I will tell you, it's a bit hidden. At least it was in mine. It's behind 9441.
Okay.
Now, you thought this public article was pretty clear in explaining the contract, correct?
That there was a contract, yes.
In explaining the contract, correct?
Explaining that there was a contract, yes.
Your Honor, I move to admit PX 9453.
Admitted.
This article is dated February 21st, 2023, correct?
Boy, you asked me to look at 9441.
No, 9453.
It is. It's dated February
Yes.
21st.
Yes.
Can you
Okay.
please turn to page 3?
Yes.
At the bottom, do you see a quote, the second to last paragraph? Do you see a quote from Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
It says that the companies haven't worked on detailed implementation plans yet. Do you see that?
Yes.
So as of February of 2023, Microsoft and NVIDIA had not worked on detailed implementation plans, correct?
Yes.
Now, if you could turn to the next page, PX 9453-004.
Yes.
And if you look at the top of that part, it says, Microsoft make me buy the game all over again, question mark. Eisler won't say, quote, we have no announcement about Game Pass right now, quote. When I ask him yes or no, quote, does the contract give you the rights or not, quote, he says simply, quote, I can't answer that question. Do you see that?
I see that. Yes.
So from this article, it is unclear whether Game Pass plays a role in the contract, correct?
Yes.
So in
From the-
relying on
yes.
this article, instead of the actual agreement between Microsoft and NVIDIA, you had no idea whether or not Game Pass was included in the agreement, correct?
Yes. The sentence in my report, I have to go back and report. The report is that they've signed agreements with these cloud providers, and that's contingent only if the contract, if this transaction goes through, and therefore that additional option to be on the cloud is a benefit of the transaction. I didn't speak about Game Pass in that sentence.
you please turn in your binder to RX 1211. It's the very next document.
Can I ask you, because it's 3:05, should we stop or do we think we can finish this witness?
Best estimate is like 10 to 15 minutes.
All right, Ms. Means and Cox? Yes. Okay. 15 max.
So looking at RX 1211, again, the document itself is under seal, but this is the agreement between NVIDIA and Microsoft, correct?
I'm in trouble.
Yes, this is the agreement between Microsoft and NVIDIA, correct?
I'm sorry. Yes,
You are not offering any legal opinions about any terms in RX 1211, correct?
Correct.
You didn't analyze each paragraph of the agreement, correct?
Correct.
You can put that away, sir. You state in your report that an independent Activision would not have made agreements to put its content on cloud gaming services, correct?
that's my view. Yes, based on the evidence.
Your opinion is that the evidence is unambiguous that Activision's strategy was not to support cloud gaming, correct?
That was my view. And say that's confirmed by the testimony I heard today. But I also say that in my report, if to the extent there's a dispute about that, I leave that to your honor to decide. But my report is based on the premise that Activision's current business strategy for its past behavior is not to put their games on the cloud.
Or could you turn in your binder to PX 8000, please?
Each 1,000
Yes.
down from quarter. One quarter.
A bit hidden behind PX 4894, but it's 8000.
X94 I have.
Maybe right behind that PX 8000.
X9441, RX1211, RX1212, RX2170,
Motion just give
You may, please.
it 8000 is the declaration of Mr. Eisler of NVIDIA, correct?
that's
Now, the part that I'm going to talk to you about is under seal, so please don't say anything out loud. But could you please turn to paragraph 43?
yes,
You did not rely on paragraph 43 in forming your opinion, correct?
but if it's not in appendix B, I would not have relied upon
And if you
the
could,
sense I described.
and if you look at paragraphs 45 and 46, again, since it is not listed in appendix B, you did not rely on these sworn statements either, correct?
That's correct.
And you have no basis to dispute Mr. Eisler's sworn assertions, correct?
I'm not attempted to leave his assertions of or investigate.
What, were you aware of them when you wrote your report and you gave your opinion?
I don't recall seeing this particular
Okay, all right,
declaration.
so that's fine. I understand.
That down, sir. In your report, you refer to the cloud agreements Microsoft signed during the pendency of this litigation, correct?
I refer to the cloud agreements that Microsoft signed during the pendency of this. Yes, I do. And I explain why they're.
You have not done any sorry, sir, we're trying to be efficient here at the court's time. You have not done any quantification or analysis to size the cloud gaming market in the future, correct?
I have not attempted to measure the size. We discussed it, I believe, in the report, but I've not done an independent investigation.
Right.
Size.
If you could just keep your answers to yes or no, we will be more mindful of the court's time. You have no opinions or analysis about the size or scope of the cloud gaming services that Ubitas provides, correct?
Correct. I don't discuss that.
You have no opinions or analysis about the size or scope of the cloud gaming services that Boosteroid provides, correct?
Correct. I don't discuss that.
You have no opinions or analysis about the size or scope of the cloud gaming services that Enware provides, correct?
Analyze that.
Do you know what country Boosteroid is located in?
Not immediately. Basically, I might once. No, recall.
Your report does not mention that Boosteroid is located in the Ukraine, correct? You did not take Boosteroid's location into consideration for your analysis, correct?
That's correct. It's irrelevant to my analysis where it's located.
You did not take into consideration the location of Boosteroid's cloud gaming servers, in your opinion, correct?
It's correct. I did not analyze.
Correct, okay.
Do you know what country Ubitas is located in?
Don't as I sit here now.
Your report does not mention that Ubitas is located in Taiwan, correct?
Correct. It does not mention that.
You did not take Ubitas's location into consideration for your analysis, correct?
Correct.
You did not take into consideration the location of Ubitas's cloud gaming servers, in your opinion, correct?
Correct.
Do you know what country Enware is located in?
I haven't investigated that.
Your report does not mention that Enware is located in Spain, correct?
Correct.
You did not take Enware's location into consideration for your analysis, correct?
Correct.
You did not take into consideration the location of Enware's cloud gaming servers, in your opinion, correct?
Correct.
And you are aware that Mr. Zimring from Google testified in this court last week, correct?
You have a general understanding of that.
And Mr. Zimring was in charge of Google Stadia, correct?
That is correct.
Mr. Zimring has substantial experience in cloud gaming services, correct?
Doubt your representation.
You did not take into consideration Mr. Zimring's testimony that the farther away a cloud gaming server is from a gamer, the worse the latency gets, correct?
Take that. This is the Simmons testimony that to account in my report.
And the higher the latency, the lower the gaming experience, correct?
Yeah.
Your opinion is that these agreements that Microsoft signed during the pendency of this litigation represent the creation of options that would not otherwise exist but for this transaction, correct?
Correct.
You did not verify what you conclude are efficiencies of the deal, correct?
I don't know what you mean by that. The contract's signed. They're conditional on the transaction. That provides another option that wouldn't otherwise exist. That's a benefit of the transaction. I will not attempt to quantify magnitude of that gap.
As we just discussed at length, you did not analyze the agreements, correct?
Yes, they exist, yes.
You agree that the extent to which these agreements provide options to consumers depends, at least in part, on the language of the agreements themselves, correct?
In part, but obviously the agreements, if they wouldn't have otherwise existed, provide an option that wouldn't have existed absent the agreements.
You have not done any quantification of the benefits to consumers on any of these agreements, correct?
I'd attempt to quantify the benefit other than point out it's a benefit.
And you are not offering any quantitative analysis of the value of these agreements that they may have created, correct?
Attempted to quantify the magnitude of those benefits other than point out they are benefits.
Yeah, I
Very briefly, Dr. Carlton, is it fair to say that a focus of your work was on evaluating the reliability of the economic models that Dr. Lee prepared in this case?
Yes, that was the primary focus of my work.
And just to use his term, one was called the demand model and one was called the foreclosure model. I believe that's right. I think you said share model and foreclosure model yesterday. You remember that?
Used share model and foreclosure model. I would sort of call it demand model because use of the term share model implies that the only thing that matters is the Xbox share of Xbox plus Sony, when in fact is model that he referred to as a share model is really a demand model that includes not just the shares, but also substitution to an outside option. And that is what you need to analyze in order to figure out the incentive to foreclose. The reason for that is you're interested in the change in Xbox sales. You don't care about the shares alone. You care about the change in Xbox sales. And by failing to account the substitution of the outside option, this demand model, over when he just uses the share model instead of his entire demand model, he overestimates the increase in Xbox sales from a hypothetical foreclosure. And I show the error that causes in his analysis.
Doctor, did you assume the markets that Professor Lee defined for purposes of your analysis?
I used his definitions in writing my report, but for the foreclosure analysis, doesn't matter what the antitrust market is. There's a very, very important point for foreclosure analysis. Substitution to other goods are what matters. So to foreclose PlayStation from Call of Duty, the question is, where do people go? He hasn't going to Xbox, but some people will go to what he calls the outside option. And if you can go to the outside option, then not as many people will go to Xbox. If you don't consider going to the outside option, you overestimate how many people go to Xbox, and that causes you to overestimate the profitability of play. So I show that error in his analysis.
Know if Dr. Lee's models account for Microsoft's offer to Sony in any way?
They do not. My recollection is his report doesn't discuss it.
Anything that occurred on cross-examination undermine your analysis about the reliability of Dr. Lee's economic models in this case?
Nothing at all. No.
Nothing
My
further.
analysis had nothing to do with those content.
Nothing further wrong.
Anything further? All right, you are excused.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about tomorrow and what we have left. We have Mr. Singer by video.
We have Mr. Singer by video. That's a defense call. We have Mr. Stewart. And we have Ms. Hood by written declaration. I thought there was a proposal this morning, maybe to play Mr. Singer just for your honor, if we were short on time.
Yes, I think that was one of the issues, and we are calling Ms. Hood as our witness, and Mr. Stewart will be there, so we'll be.
So Ms. Hood is in person.
Mr. Stewart is in person, yes. Ms. Hood is in person, but since we kind of streamlined for you, we submitted her declaration on direct, so it's just their cross.
Okay. And then Mr. Singer by video.
Yes.
Okay. So I need to rule on the confidentiality. Okay. I can come back and do that in closed session in 10 minutes so that you can prepare that tonight for tomorrow. And for tomorrow, in terms of schedule, I don't know how long you think it goes. I have to do my case management conferences at 1:30, from 1:30 to 2:30. So what we could do is just plan on closing at 2:30, right? And you'll have the evidence in maybe by noon.
Our best.
Whatever you want, Your Honor. We will
Yeah,
do.
I mean, I'd
We can
rather
do
not go
it's
right up till 1:30 and then do
Right.
CMCs and then do closings. I won't be very helpful.
I don't
but,
think we will have much at all.
Okay, all right. So that'll be the plan. So let's just plan on doing the closings at 2:30. then. And we'll take our lunch break from 1:30 to 2:30 and we'll do morning breaks as well.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay, so we're emptying the courtroom and just for the under seal matter with respect to Mr. Singer, we'll resume in 10 minutes.
Your honor.